Week 1 of the Elestrals Championship League Season 1 is finally here, and this week I am facing off against Nexus Elestrals, aka Mula. To start off this deck profile, I think first I want to go over what decks I think Mula can bring. He is rocking the water and wind element, so we both share water, but I do think wind provides a lot more utility to his options than fire does for me. And actually, I think Water-Wind is an overall stronger pairing just in general. Now, what I do have over Mula is access to Eruption, which I could see potentially really scaring him. I've definitely burned him before in constructed play with my Eruptions before. And as such, with Wind being so expensive, I could see him trying to pivot over more to Water, because Water can be way more efficient than Wind. I mean, it definitely has its expensive plays, but it can play more efficiently, as well as having access to Sluggle to be able to recover 3 spirits on top of 3 Ambrosia. As such, I could see him bring a Water Stall Sustain style deck, just trying to outlast me and keep him above the Eruption range. And I do think that his version of Water Stall that he can build is a bit stronger than my own, because he has access to the Pelagorius to help him pinpoint search a lot of his pieces, so it's just going to be more consistent than my version of it. Now, that is not the deck I am the most scared of, because Mula also has access to Wind Nexus, which, if my showing with Wind against J. Johnny's Water in the first Elestrals Championship League says anything, Exaltair just sitting there burning over the top, being able to swing with Chrysor as well, it hurts. It really does. So I'm definitely scared of Mula trying to set up that, take advantage of my slower deck, and the fact that he has Aeolus for some great consistency to do just that. So I definitely have that big, hot on my mind when I was building this deck and how I've prepared it for, and also made sure my side deck is set up to be able to side into that matchup. Kind of adjacent to the Wind Nexus deck, I could also see him trying to splash in some fun with Clydesdale. I know he really likes that Elestral. I've got plenty of answers for it, so I'm not personally too worried about it, but I also don't want to forget about it and just get blindsided to that 12 attack, possible double attack scenario that Clydesdale can create. And finally, I could just see Mula playing a good stuff deck. He definitely has a lot of very scary and threatening Elestrals, some that I can name off the top of my head. I've already named Exaltair. Sorlet is very scary. It's definitely going to be one of the most difficult Elestrals for me to deal with. Galaxy definitely has a lot of weight in the water mirror match, and so does Molstation, which I'll get to when I go over my deck profile. With that context out of the way and getting into my deck list, I want to start off with the part of the 5 guys core I have access to, and I'm running 2 Galaxy, 2 Nekruff, and 2 Smoltuga here. So of course 5 attackers can just be very strong, very threatening, usually the highest attack stat that any Elestral can have, and can easily run over stuff or trade into other 5 attackers. They can be difficult to deal with. Pretty standard stuff, that's why 5 guys is a deck all on its own. I do think Galaxy is going to be one of the most important cards in my deck, especially if Mula is running Water Elestrals, because simply put, it can be a more efficient Sorlet against those Water Elestrals if Mula puts them in the position of their higher stat without a Galaxy on board, because Galaxy can just throw down, swap the stats, and it's almost like I'm changing their positions to hit over the lower stat. That being said though, Mula can use the same trick on me, so I'm definitely going to be hyper diligent about trying to play around that when I can. And Nekruff and Smoltuga are just solid. Smoltuga being able to shout Nekruff is great. It's just a great pressure card with that 5 attack stat, being able to burn a spirit. And since a lot of my other stuff is just very setup reliant, like the Galaxy Smoltuga setup, just being able to throw down a Nekruff that just innately has 5 attack is going to be invaluable. And of course, Smoltuga's 5 defense makes it hard to out, and I can just kind of stall it so I can throw down my Galaxy and have 2 of 5 attackers in exchange. That being said though, why am I only running 2 Nekruff and 2 Smoltuga? Simply put, I wanted space to run this next card in my deck, and that is the 2 Molstation here. The reason I wanted the 2 Molstation is because I found in testing that Molstation is a very powerful out to the Galaxy. Because Galaxy swaps attack and defense, I can throw down a Molstation and instantly rival it. The only thing I have to be careful around is if Mula possibly has a Gorgon's Gaze set, because he can Gorgon's Gaze his own Galaxy during the battle step, and at that point it's just 2 attack to 1 attack and my Molstation loses. But notably, I can do the same thing to him, so I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that, because I do think this is going to be a clutch card for dealing with the Galaxy. And obviously it's just 1 Gorgon's Gaze that can out it, but you need the Gorgon's Gaze to be able to do so. I do think this card also has plenty of merits even outside just the water matchup, even though I've been talking a lot about that. Just being able to have an Elestral that can be a big body but also pressure with attack if need be, even if it does cost me a Water Spirit, will be great into the Wind Nexus matchup, mainly to challenge Exaltair. That's also why I do like Nekruff, to challenge Exaltair, but also Molstation is the added benefit of also challenging Sorlet, with that being able to switch to 6 attack outing Sorlet's 5. With that package out of the way, moving over to the rest of the Elestrals I'm running 2 Aphros, 2 Foamy, and 2 Sluggle. So some pretty standard water stall tools. Makes sense because this kind of deck is kind of more focused on water because I think it's my strongest package, and these are definitely really strong cards in there. So starting with Aphros here, this is just a great draw engine. I am still convinced that your win rate does improve by a decent bit if you can get off Afros's draw 2 twice, off the same Afros, same spirits, because that's just phenomenal value. It just gives you so many options, it lets you see so many cards more consistently. It always feels really good to have that going. But also, there are more ways that I can flex around with those spirits if I'm worried about Afros being answered. For one, I saw in testing that sometimes I would go Afros, find a Nectar of the Gods, and just cast that outright to use those spirits to get immediate value, and that's a-okay as well. So, strong draw engine, a lot of flexibility. I think it's really great if I end up just going into a stall game with Mula. Then 2 Foamy, because Foamy is also really strong. I know in some past deck profiles I was moving away from Foamy, but after talking to Jack and reevaluating kind of what I was doing, why I was cutting it, I realized that the reason I was cutting it was because I was trying to make more of a mid-range tempo water deck, which Foamy is not mid-range or tempo. So just kind of throwing this down, and I couldn't pressure with it. So I felt like I was just doing nothing and just waiting for an answer to eat up the Foamy when I just want something more immediate. But as a stall and toolbox tool, Foamy is great. So I've been trying to improve at definitely playing stall, and I can definitely see a lot of value in this Foamy here. In the stall matchup, I think this will be great. Against Wind Nexus, I'm looking to cut this thing because I need some pressure for Exalter, and Foamy's not it. So I'll say that right away, but I'll get more into the details of what I'll set it out when I get to my side deck. Sluggo here is just really solid, just like as I said with Mula's on stall, just recovering 3 spirits is really strong, but with Sluggle in my own list, I also like recovering 3. It'll help me stabilize, outlast the game, and I know a lot of times in more aggressive matchups, sometimes just seeing one Ambrosia can be the difference in between you having the resources to win the game and lose the game, and I do think that Sluggle can also serve a similar purpose, even if it's a bit slow. If there's like an open board, like I used a shield to remove Mula's 1 Elestral, just throwing this down when I don't really need to use my other response tools, recovering 3 just gives me some extra cushion. It feels really solid. So 2 copies in the deck, I think this will just be kind of sticking around no matter what deck I'm up against. Moving over to the runes, I want to talk about the 2 Eruption first. So I am on it, only 2 because this deck really isn't focused around the Eruption out. I just like Eruption to try to limit the number of spirits Mula has access to and try to kind of force him into possibly some suboptimal plays or just kind of force the game. And if it ever wins me it, awesome. This card's just a really powerful tool that I have access to try to push the game, so I see no reason not to run it. I was trying out some other things like 2 cost Elestrals on the top end, but they never really felt good enough, while Eruption is just something I can hold for an opportune time. It just felt a lot more flexible and still had good output without a lot of the cons of running a 2 cost. Continuing with the runes, I do run a Trident package with 2 Trident and 3 Poseidon. Obviously Trident Lock is pretty strong here, and then I want Nexus Banks for Afros as well. And then Poseidon is nice to be able to Nexus Water Spirits. In testing, I definitely had some games where I would just have a Poseidon in hand, and the deck I was testing against would have no spirits left in Spirit deck, and I could just throw down the Poseidon, Nexus a Spirit onto an Elestral, just crash if it's like 2/5 attackers, and do the final Spirit damage, and that was good enough to win. So a lot of great utility for both of these cards. I will say, I don't think that these cards are going to be great into the Wind Nexus matchup, so I will be looking to cut them. But in the Water Stall matchup, and if Mula really isn't focusing on Wind Nexus, just being able to set up a board and stall and then be able to throw it on the Trident Lock to secure that board to be able to push in seems really strong. And with Nekruff in my deck, I can actually benefit from going up to 7 attack with Trident, which feels really good. I do have to be careful though when I leave up my Poseidons, because Mula can set up Trident Lock on me using my own Poseidon. Same thing goes if he's on water, I can set up my own Trident Lock, which is also nice, so definitely going to be looking to take advantage of that. But the nice thing is that sometimes if I want to leave up the Poseidon just for that extra spirit, which sometimes I do, I don't really want to lose the Poseidon, like if I'm doing an Afros Nexus, but at least I have the option to always pull the spirit off of Poseidon to use a counter rune, so I'm definitely going to be evaluating in those moments. Do I have a counter rune that I can pull spirits off of Poseidon if need be, or should I really just sack the Poseidon and not run into the Trident, or does it not matter if Mula plays Trident at all? Those are what I'm going to be paying attention to. Moving over to my counter rune package, I run 3 Gorgon's Gaze, 3 Pandora's Box, 2 Poison Tipped Arrow, and 2 Shield of Achilles. So only 10 counter runes. The counter runes are obviously good, very good in this deck, but notably I'm not running Tsunami because of the threat of running into the water matchup. I really don't want to have dead cards. I want all my cards to be live, hence why I'm not running it. And I just felt like there are other cards that I could run in this deck to help push the game, give me plenty of options. I didn't necessarily need counter runes or abundance of counter runes. Sometimes I just need more proactive responses as well, and not cards that I have to set for a turn. But 3 Gorgon's Gaze is pretty standard. There's going to be strong against a lot of things. Foamy, for example, some of his search cards like Peliquarius. It can stop an Exalter if it looks like it's getting out of hand, but if it's only burning me for the 2 spirits, I'd rather just keep the Gorgon's Gaze around, but it can come up. Hydrake's another great example. Sorlet, if I really want to protect something, it just hits a ton of stuff. Granted, it doesn't deal with the Elestral, but if I'm just have a board set up that I just need to protect from attacks, Gorgon's Gaze can help with that. 3 Pandora's Box because Mula's on wind, and this just stops him from getting a lot of value, being able to shut down that Aeolus, shut down that Hydrake or Twindra, or if he pivots more towards water, can shut down the Pelaquarius and the Foamy. That just seems super valuable. Does cost me a few spirits, so I do want to be careful of that, but the philosophy is those 2 spirits are totally worth it if I'm keeping Mula off of specific pieces and preventing him from toolboxing. It'd also be great if I can mill some of those important cards so he doesn't have access to them. And then the 2-2 split of Shield and PTA, the logic here is I really don't want to be sitting on dead cards, so 2 PTA can be very nice in a stall matchup if he's playing Water Stall to play on a Foamy, a Defense Aphros, you know, anything that's just kind of thrown in defense or really can't hit over stuff, I think PTA will be super good against. But if he's playing more offensive with some big stuff, especially like Sorlet, PTA just sometimes isn't enough. A lot of times I'm spending way more spirits than I need to just to end up getting outed anyway and dealt some, or to out his thing. It doesn't necessarily feel good. In a lot of those situations, I'd rather have Shield of Achilles, which I run at 2 copies to out those. But at the same time, Shield of Achilles bounces it back, so I'm not really getting rid of the answer. I'm just kind of delaying it, and sometimes that's fine. But also, if Mula's playing more of a stall matchup, or stall game, this card's just going to be saying they're dead anyway, and I'd rather have a PTA. So that's why I opted for just a 2-2 split of each, and I could always side in more depending on what Mula ends up bringing. Rounding off the deck, I've got the generic Invoke Runes, 3 Ambrosia, 2 Nectar of the Gods, and 3 Resting on Your Laurels. So Ambrosia, since this is more of a stall deck, and as I said, it's kind of pivoting between game styles, but honestly, no, it doesn't even matter the deck. Ambrosia is just super solid. That Recover 3 gives you the resources a lot of times to just continue playing the game, even when both players are running low on spirits. It can be super crucial, so definitely want to max this out. Want to see this card to be able to make sure I have enough resources to do stuff. 2 Nectar of the Gods, despite having Aphros, I still want to be able to draw, and sometimes I don't necessarily want to throw out the Aphros. It's not the board state to do that. Just having another draw card to help draw me into some pieces, some back row, some removal, some better Elestrals to just kind of pressure with, just seems really good. Only 2 copies, that's pretty standard right now. I don't think you really want to see the 3. It's just too much resources for not enough return. You really want to be doing something, but sometimes you need cards to be able to do stuff. 3 Resting on Your Laurels, because this will be a slower deck by nature, so sometimes Mula will probably get ahead on board and I need ways to clean it up, and Resting on Your Laurels will do that wonderfully. This is also great if he tries to go for an aggressive Nexus and has 1 Elestral on board with up to 3 spirits on it. Laurels can just deal with that right away, or even 2 spirits. That's probably optimal more for Exaltair, but it really does help in those scenarios, and from testing, I really did need this card. Moving over to the spirit deck, I run 6 Vipyro and 14 Leviathan. So the logic behind this is, well, there isn't really too much to really discuss here because I'm on 2 elements. These are the only 2 I can run. But pretty much I just want enough Fire Spirits to cast my cards. So I pretty much have enough Vipyro to cast 2 Eruption and 2 Necrof, which you saw that's exactly what's in my deck. Now with siding, that does fluctuate a little bit, but also I still think this is optimal for those. And I've got Ambrosia to recover them if need be, and the rest Leviathan because it is a primary water deck. Moving over to the side deck, I run 1 Necrof, 1 Foamy, 1 Smoltuga, 3 Veritaqua, 1 Eruption, 3 Tsunami, a PTA, and a Shield. And I realize now that I set that up very messily, but yeah, that is my side deck. Here, kind of going over the reasons why I run these. So I kind of mentioned that if my opponent is on Wind Nexus, I really want to keep him off pieces, so the extra Smoltuga and Necrof will be huge for that. Necrof is probably the best way to aggress that Exaltair, and Smoltuga can help me find it, as well as just being a solid 5 attacker to contest the board if it gets bigger as well with Galaxy. Another Foamy, because I do think in the Water Mirror match, Foamy is going to be super crucial, so I do want to be able to reside this in again into that matchup if I deem it necessary. Honestly, this could probably be a lot of other stuff, and I ended up not properly saving my updates on the app, so this might have been another card. I'm not sure what it was, but I mean, Foamy in that matchup seems good. I didn't really have anything else I wanted to run. These are just kind of rounding out other playsets and tools, so it's fine there. Let me know down in the comments below. What do you think I should run over Foamy here, or do you think Foamy's fine? I'm really curious what you all think. But the other Celestial here is Veritaqua, because in the Water Stall matchup, and honestly maybe even into the wind matchup when I side in my Tsunami here. Veritago's great at just dealing with defense position Elestrals, doesn't care about how big its defense is, it just outright destroys it. It's a huge counter to Foamy as well, which will feel great, and can also counter Hydreic if it is in defense position as well. One more Eruption, just in case I really just feel like I need that burn potential to kind of close out a game. That's just kind of feeling how the matchup's developing in really both Wind Nexus or the Water Stall deck. I don't think I'll really need this in Water Stall. I'm very confident my deck can outstall Mula, but I think in the Wind matchup, I could totally see me putting this in as well, just to punish him if he tries to overextend, or just the fact that wind is so much expensive. Just use this multiple Eruptions as a win condition, or just more consistently finding it. 3 Tsunami, because if Mula's on primary wind, I'm definitely going to want to side in these Tsunamis. They can really stall out some big offensive pushes, especially with like Sorlet trying to answer stuff. It's really cheap, and it's just a great way to then also force his more offensive Elestrals into positions that I can more easily attack over while protecting my Elestrals. And then PTA and Shield just to round out those playsets depending on the matchup. PTA, if I'm into a stall deck, I can just side that in because it is going to be more optimal against the slower builds. And Shield of Achilles if I'm up against wind and really feel like I just need to keep him off pieces to keep my own on board. I can see an argument for not running into wind because, again, that just means I have to deal with those answers later. But at the same time, if I can build up a bigger board using Shield to kind of protect myself, I might just be able to run away with the game as well. And I mentioned some of the cards I'll be siding out, but just kind of go over them again. I can see myself siding out Afroses and Foamies into the Wind Nexus matchup because they're too slow. They're frankly too slow. Possibly signing out Eruptions into the Water matchup just to make some room for maybe some Foamies, maybe some Veritaquas, Tsunamis, really whatever I need to in that matchup. Again, it's just kind of reading what kind of cards does he have in that. So it's not so much if he's playing this deck, I side out this. It's, okay, he's playing this style of deck. What other cards are you including in there? What do I think I need to cut? Probably going to be cutting all this Trident Lock stuff if I'm in the Wind Nexus matchup, because again, I don't think Trident Lock's just too slow and puts out too many spears to possibly run into a Nexus burn. So I just want to kind of focus on my big beaters. Might keep in some Poseidons though, to try to close out some games by being able to Nexus some spirits onto it. This also just reminded me, one other option with Poseidon is I can Nexus a spirit onto Nekruff to make it immune to Tsunami, but I do have to be careful because the minute that water spirit's on Nekruff, Galaxy can be thrown down the board, swap Nekruff to 1 attack, and that's not very good for me. But back to siding, I do think my counter runes will stay fairly consistent, but I do think I'll probably cut out one Pandora's Box into the Water Stall matchup, really a primary Water matchup. While it is great against Foamy and Pelagorius, I don't think it's so good that I need max copies, especially since Gorgon's Gaze accomplishes a similar thing, but for the same amount, just don't get the mill. And then from here, really just adjusting PTA shield ratios depending on the matchup I'm in. I do think I will cut a shield for a PTA if I'm in the Water Stall matchup, and I don't foresee changing up these Invoke runes. So rounding out this deck profile, what is the strategy of this deck? Well, it's flexible. This deck, by default, is kind of set up to be more of a stall deck, thinking I'm going to run into the Water matchup. I don't know why, but my gut is telling me that I think Mula will run Water this week, or at least a good chunk Water, and try to stall out for the Eruptions, so that's what I'm going with primary in my deck. But as you can see with my side deck, I do have the tools to be able to pivot over to more of a mid-range tempo style of play to try to keep that Exaltair in check if he's on Wind Nexus or really any Wind deck. I definitely think this is the most competitive version of my 2 elements. Do I think it's good enough to beat Mula? I don't really know. I'm not the most confident on it. That Wind Nexus is very scary. He definitely has a lot of powerful checks in water as well, and I definitely feel like that fire is not holding up its weight when deck building, but I think this is the best deck I can build. I think by default, this is just going to be the most competitive deck I can build each week, so I'm hoping to see how it performs this week to kind of get a good gauge on it, and then I'm hoping in future weeks that I can loosen up a little bit on the competitiveness and try out some more fun stuff. I was testing out some fun stuff, like I had a Leo Lock idea, I had a Trifrontal idea. It just never really panned out into this matchup, and I'm really wanting to see how good this elemental pairing can be this week. So hence why I'm just going for the more competitive build. But if you're excited for the ECL2, please consider liking this video, subscribing to my channel, and turning on the notification bell so you're notified when I do upload more content, just in general, but also for the ECL. My gameplay video against Mula will be going up this Saturday, December the 2nd at 10 a.m. EST, so look forward to that. But that being said though, look forward to more content, especially ECL content, coming out real soon.